Hi, I'm Paul Lisnek, and welcome to Behind the Curtain. Don't be confused. You're not really about to hear an episode of I Love Lucy. You are listening to Behind the Curtain podcast, and welcome. This is Paul Lisnek. But this is decided to do something fun this week. We have so much politics going on and so much stress and tension and issues going on. I thought, you know what, let's just take some time and have a little fun. Well, I am a huge I Love Lucy fan, and by the way, a Three Stooges fan. They're going to rear their head during this interview. And so one night, I'm in a hotel. And as I'm traveling, and like many of you, I'm kind of on my phone, on my iPad, and I'm searching around, I'm looking at things, and I come across these clips, these YouTube clips, which talk about bloopers in Lucy. Now, I'm a big fan. I know a lot of history of this show, and yet it was amazing to me that you can come across all these video clips and audio clips which show all these mistakes that got made. And so I thought, this is really amazing. I wonder who's doing this. Well, the investigator that I am, I start looking around, whatever, and it's this guy. It's this one guy who is quite well known in the world of online gaming and YouTube. And I may be a little too old for some of this stuff, but he may be somebody that a lot of you do know, as indeed some people I have asked are familiar with him. He's been the guy creating all this stuff and more, and I invited him on because I just thought you need to meet him. He goes by the name Ricknineg. Ricknineg. He joins us now from Los Angeles, California. And Rick, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Paul. I appreciate it.
Well, so I said it was sort of happy circumstance that I fall upon what you're doing, but let me start with kind of an introduction. Tell folks what you do. Look, you're kind of a young guy here. You're not 60 years old doing this stuff, which would still be young. But tell folks sort of what you do and how you got into these old classic shows.
Yeah, great question. So basically, I would classify myself right now as a YouTuber. So I make YouTube videos, and I basically do research and come up with, all of these scenes and all of these just pieces of golden history that we have kind of in the vault. And I wanted to put them together in a nice little, commentary mode and come out with these videos. And so they're on YouTube. They're available free for everyone to see from around the world. And so that's one of the highlights. And the reason I got into this was I was a little kid watching cartoons, and there is I Love Lucy in a commercial. After the cartoons, we're going to be playing I Love Lucy. I said, what is this? I just stay tuned, and I've been hooked ever since.
And so, as I said, you're not an old guy. You're a younger guy. So what is it, do you think, about I Love Lucy that 60-plus years into this, we might even be hitting the 70-year mark soon, so many years after that show got created, that has young people, old people, I mean, you can go up to the littlest kid, and they know that show, and they know those people. What is it that has such sustenance through the years?
That's such a great question, and I don't even know if I have a direct answer for you, but it is true. I mean, little kids know about Lucy, and there's so many shows out there, but here we have a black and white show. There's no color here, and still people from today, little kids love this show. I think it's the writing. There's so much gold in the writing, in the four primary actors, and just the staff. It's just a combined, I don't know, it's a gem. It's a gem show that has just lasted the test of time. There's a magic in that show.
And you also have done, because now that I've kind of follow you on YouTube and see some of the other things you do, it's not just these blooper reels that I've been talking about. It's almost as though you've taken on the mission to educate people. Again, there are other topics. I'm just focusing in on Lucy right now. But yeah. you take the time to educate people. You've got sort of photograph books, some rare photographs, and you are constantly making new videos to introduce people and showing them scenes they may not have seen, photographs they may not have seen. I'm just curious. Talk to me about your audience. Who is tuning? Are you getting folks like me who've been around for a while who watch that show? Are you getting young people that you're introducing to Lucy? Who's getting into this with you?
This is so funny a question, because when I got contacted by you, I was so surprised, because I get people from all walks of life. I get people younger than myself, so I'm 29, but I get people in their teens sometimes write me and say, oh, I love your videos. I get people in their 70s. I get people who said they were 3 or 4 years old and they remember their parents watching the show for the first time when it aired. And so I get people from all walks of life, all ages, but of course a lot of people, in the older range because they remember the show from, way back when.
Now, have you, just out of curiosity, you put this stuff up there. There are some people still around. I mean, the original cast is all gone. A lot of the original folks who I actually had the pleasure of meeting. They used to have these I Love Lucy conventions in Burbank years ago, and I would start to go to those. So I had the pleasure of meeting a lot of the writers, directors, Tommy Thompson, Madeline Davis-Pugh. I mean, a lot of people were still around, and being able to interact with them. Lucy's driver, her hairstylist, these folks, and some of them are actually Frank and well, they're still around. But anyway, getting to meet them, and first of all, have you ever heard from anybody tied to the show in any way? Greg Oppenheimer is the son of Jess Oppenheimer, who was the producer, one of the creators of the show. Do you ever hear from anybody tied to the show who's also come across your stuff?
That's a great question because I think my next venture is to move. I'm still going to continue all of the videos that I'm doing, but I want to get into people who have some connection of the show and bring them to my channel, whether through interviews or maybe, contacting them in some way. And I was very honored to be contacted by Lucy's daughter. So Lucy Arnaz Luckenbill, her name now.
Right.
And she saw one of my videos, one of my most popular videos, and she commented on it. I thought it was someone else. I didn't believe it. But then I was able to message her through Facebook, through social media, and that, yes, she confirmed that was her. And we talked a little bit about Lucy, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, and she is, she's not one that has ever turned away from the family history. Over the years, I've seen her perform. She used to do a show that was a tribute to her dad. So it was all this Cuban music and all that kind of stuff, which was amazing. And I met her as well, and she certainly is open to all of this. She understands who she comes from, and she understands the influence they've had on the industry. And let me ask you about that as you look at today's world and the TV as it's shaped up, and of course your world, which is so much online. In what ways, or if there's any ways, do you see an influence of Lucy, of that comedy, of that show, on the way in which people get their entertainment today? Is there a flip over to it?
When I come to think of it, one of the reasons why I love Lucy and Three Stooges and just those classic shows is because it brings so many people together from many different groups. You would be surprised just the wide variety of people that I have on my channel putting comments down, and people that maybe would get in their little clubs and little cliques. And it's funny how they connect. I see people connect from my channel who write to each other or say, hey, I didn't know that you were, we look fairly close. People talk to each other like that. So I think with, all that's going on in the world, people want some safety. They want some laughter. They want some nostalgia. And I think these shows provide that. And I guess my channel is a way to see that for free. If you have an internet connection, you can pretty much see my videos. And so it's a great gift to be able to share that.
And so, and again, as I mentioned in opening this segment, that you've done all sorts of videos on the bloopers that happen in the show, the mistakes that happen in the show. Now, some are videos, so we can't work with that in a podcast situation, but many are audio, and we can actually hear the mistakes and things that happen over time. Sometimes you kind of wonder whether things are, whether these mistakes happen over various shows and the writers have simply forgotten what they said in one show from another. It's a continuity issue, which we try to make sure doesn't happen in movies today, but maybe back then it's something that could. So let's just try this out. We've got a couple of clips that you've picked for us, and we're going to play it, and then you can kind of let us know. Actually, you should tell us ahead of time what it is the mistake is going to be. And the first one, go ahead and tell us about it.
Yeah, so the first one, there's two of them that I have included there. I forgot exactly what order they're in, but one has to do with Ethel. And so, Ethel is, of course, Lucy's friend, and we do see that in one scene, she has the ability to drive. And this is earlier on in the show and earlier in the season. And so she said, I was able to take a, station wagon. Now, later on in the show, she says, well, I wish Fred taught me how to drive. I wish I knew how to drive.
And that can't be. All right, let's play that clip, and we'll hear that. Those two lines, which you have to have been watching over seasons to pick up on, but let's listen to that clip.
How'd you get here? I borrowed a station wagon from the lodge. I trailed you all the way from your campsite. It's parked back down the road. Oh, boy, I envy you. I always wanted Fred to teach me how to drive, but we never owned a car.
Well, there you go. You can't go from I drove down here to we never owned a car. I always wanted to learn how to drive. What do you think? I know it's a best guess, but you think it's continuity issues, or do you think, just from your study of so many different forms, and we'll talk about some of the other ones, or do you think it's just a matter of nobody really thought about it? The humor was what the humor was at the time, period?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think there's a lot of, it goes much deeper than a simple answer. The reason is a fewfold. And so the first reason is, remember, reruns were not a big thing. They pretty much didn't exist at the time. And so, some of these writers, they were working super hard. I mean, they wrote 40 episodes in 40 weeks. That's literally one episode a week.
And that's not, just in case people don't know, today, these days, you get booked really, if you're lucky, the full season is 13.
Right. So, I mean, that is insane. They were pumping out episodes, and these are good quality episodes, obviously. That's one of the reasons why people love them so much. But the fact that they were so good, but then coming out so frequently, it was hard to keep track. But also, one other thing, the idea of continuity and story. So, of course, the idea of story they wanted to keep flowing, and the second episode has to do a lot with Lucy learning how to drive, and so that would kind of echo Ethel saying, "Oh, I wish I learned how to drive." And so those are things that people may not have picked up on, especially without reruns. And so I cut the writer some slack there.
And in fact, and there's so many. I'll tell you what. Let's set up the second clip and talk about it. There's just others I'm just going to kind of bring up and chat with you about, because again, if you're a Lucy fan, you catch these things. What's the second clip we're going to hear?
Okay, so the second clip is great, and this focuses more on Lucy herself. And so if you watch a few episodes, you know that she does play the saxophone, and she plays it horribly on the show. It's hilarious. And earlier on in season 2, we have the episode The Saxophone. And, well, I think you'll notice that she can only play one song. However, if you go to season 6, she says that she can only play one song, but it's a different song. So I won't spoil what song.
All right, let's take a listen.
Everything I play sounds like Glower. That's the only piece I ever learned. No Sweet Sue? No, why? Because that's the only tune I know.
So there you go. Glowworm is the only thing she ever knew. Sweet Sue is the only thing she ever. And by the way, Sweet Sue, I'll never forget, that one comes up in so many different episodes. I don't know whether they had a deal, they had rights to certain songs, but there are certain songs that always kind of made their way, and maybe it was some of the ones Desi had recorded throughout the series. But not only do we have those mistakes, but some folks who watch the show might realize, and I know there's nothing I can hit you with you won't know, but even when we get them traveling, the neighbor, Ethel Mertz, she has a variety of different middle names throughout the course of the series.
Right. Yes, she does. And that's a funny thing, because starting out earlier in 1953 in an episode where Lucy and Ethel, they buy the same dress, her middle name was Louise, apparently. And in my opinion, that's what they chose for the character. That's what they gave her. However, 3 months later, her middle name was Roberta, which is actually Vivian Vance's real middle name. And then finally we have Ethel May Mertz, which is Vivian Vance's mother's name. So it's kind of an interesting little change there.
And so, and what you get, and by the way, I do remember that because of the character identification that happened in that show, Lucy, of course, was the only one that used her real name. Lucy was Lucille in real life. But Desi, of course, got called Ricky. Vivian was Ethel, and Bill Frawley became Fred. And one of the things that I think bothered Frawley and Vivian throughout the years was they lost their own identity. People looked at them and basically, you're Ethel Mertz. And Lucy, from what I understand, once said to Vivian, don't ever use another fake name again. Use your real name. And, of course, in the later Lucy shows, she was always known as Viv.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that was part of her trying to reclaim who she was and tell people, hey, you see my work, but my name is Vivian Vance. I love the character. Yeah.
And that, by the way, that is a common issue even today, right? You've got celebrities today who they get pegged into a certain role or they're known for something. They can't break out of it, and they can be career killers for some people. But for others who sort of embrace what they're known for. There's so many shows today where stars, 60s TV show stars and whatever, kind of embrace what they were so beloved for and make appearances around the country. And to me, that makes more sense, because why deny the reason that something has made you kind of a big star today? So, by the way, one of my other favorite mistakes was, and you and I have talked about this, I know you remember it, but during the episode which is where Lucy tells Ricky that she's going to have a baby. They were not allowed to say the word pregnant back then. She's having trouble getting his attention, and so eventually she comes to the club, and he sings Rockabye Baby, and this was going to be his way of trying to identify who was the pregnant woman. And, of course, he comes across Lucy as he's singing the song. Tell my listeners, what is it that happened when he sang that song?
Well, it's really interesting because you have to remember this is a real husband and wife who are playing husband and wife, and so obviously they're in character, and they've got cameras on them, and they have a huge 300-person audience watching them as well. But they're actually having a real baby. There's a baby in Lucy. So the idea is emotions get to them, and it throws them off. They have a script that they have to follow, but the emotions get the best of Ricky, and, well, they kind of both start to tear up, and he forgets to sing the song that he's supposed to, and the guys in the back who are playing the music, the orchestra, they kind of have to shout out, hey, sing the baby song, hey, get back off script.
Right.
And he realizes it, and he's like, oh, okay, let me start singing.
Right. And not only does that happen, you're right, but then even in Rockabye Baby, he actually messes up the line and just gets the song wrong. And I think you're exactly right. It was truly an emotional moment. It's in front of a live audience, so although they did retape things from time to time, it was something they tried not to do. They tried to do it as sort of live to tape. And by the way, in just some of the history of the show, I mean, Desi Arnaz was known for creating the 3-camera shoot. He was known for, this is one of the first shows that they could film in Hollywood where they wanted to live, but then through film, get it over to the East Coast where it could also play where it needed to. And then Desi also kept syndication rights. One of the most brilliant minds in the creation of television ever.
Absolutely. And when I found that out, I was completely shocked. Because, of course, you don't think of these things. You get into the story and you don't think about who's behind the camera and who does that. But Desi was a powerful force. It was said that, and not in a negative way, but he was just rabid. He knew how to talk to executives. He knew how, he was a businessman at heart, and they kind of didn't want to cross him. At first, they thought they could kind of walk around him all on top of him, but they were wrong, and he was brilliant. He really was.
Just before we came on, I was chatting with our executive producer of our WGN Midday News, who was filling me in that there's an author named Brad Meltzer, who is very well known for writing these sort of murder mysteries in the Supreme Court setting. But he also writes a series of children's books, and which I did not know. And one of the books is an I Love Lucy book. It's the I Am Lucille Ball. And so here is somebody who is taking the time to bring to children the life of Lucille Ball. So do you think, Rick, that people, that 60 years from now, when you and I will once again visit this podcast, will we still be talking about I Love Lucy?
I think so. I think there's something in the show that just transcends time, and the jokes are still relevant, the scenes are still relevant, and that's what they strove to do. Jeff Oppenheimer was pretty much the brains behind the show, and he was a genius in his own right, of course, and he was always striving to keep the script very real, and they're a husband and wife, and so they're going to have a baby, and they're going to have quarrels with their neighbors, and they're going to, Lucy's going to try to maybe be sneaky and buy a couple dresses here without her husband knowing. I mean, there's things that happened in the 50s that still happen in the year 2017 and probably still in the year 2100.
I so agree. And by the way, it is interesting. We're going to move on, but moments in the show, like when she was pregnant, the writers didn't want to deal with it. They wanted to hide her behind couches, not show she was pregnant. And, of course, it was Lucy and Desi who went, guess what? She's pregnant. So having to strike a deal, like we'll never say the word pregnant, and all these deals that had to get created. And, of course, the very beginning of the show when producers said, no one's ever going to believe that you're married to a Cuban band leader. And she said,
well, I am married to
I am married to a Cuban band leader. So really just so well done. I Love Lucy, a classic forever. But then as I found this stuff and fell in love with your work in working with I Love Lucy, I keep looking around because if you play enough on YouTube, other parts of your work will come up. And I came across, I'm going to go back to the theme music here for this, have our producer trigger it, and I think most people will know exactly where we're shifting to. Ah, yes, there we have it. I could just listen to it all day. Of course, people who don't know think, well, isn't that Three Blind Mice, and of course, no, but it is. But it's actually the theme song for one of the greatest comedy teams of all times, and that is the Three Stooges. Which, by the way, Rick, for our listeners, can you draw a parallel between Lucy and the Three Stooges?
Yeah, so that's a great segue because they actually appeared on screen together. There is a short where they're both, all Three Stooges, and Lucille Ball are in there. Lucille Ball, I believe, is 23 years old, which is amazing. She's got a natural hair color, and it's three little pigskins. She is with the Stooges. It's amazing.
Yeah, and she just plays. She's kind of just one of the women in the show. You wouldn't pay much attention except for the fact that when you know it's Lucille Ball, you go, wait a minute, that's Lucy. Once again in a comedic role, but not in the starring role she eventually turned to. So we get to the Stooges. So here's Lucy, a classic of the 50s and into the 60s, and then we go to the Stooges. Now once again, you said you're only 29 years old. You're a young guy, and when the Stooges, you're talking about them. Dude, you are back in the 30s. You're back in the 30s. You're back in the 40s. You're back in the 50s, before you're born, before I'm born. And yet, even today, the Stooges as big as they ever were. So I'll start with a similar question. What is it about the Three Stooges that keeps them at the front burner of people's love of old comedy?
Well, this is a different type of story because my father is the biggest Stooge fan in the world. He was born in Argentina, and believe it or not, they play the Three Stooges in Argentina in Spanish, and that's what he saw them as a, 10, 12-year-old boy.
Wow.
And he still watches them, and that's how I started watching them, and I was like, these guys are amazing in their own right, and I want to watch more, so I did.
And so, of course, now today it's almost, they're not exactly PC, right? It's tough to watch the Stooges and you see the violence and the poking in the eyes and the, but you almost have to forgive them that, I think, because it's violence, but it's not violence the way we have violence concerns. At least I don't think. There might be a listener who's saying I'm wrong with that. But I just think in the world of comedy that this got created, it's almost unacceptable. The problem, of course, was when people started poking their fingers in their friends' eyes.
Yes, and my section for my Three Stooges videos, I always have a viewer discretion is advised. I kind of have to because, and I don't have that with I Love Lucy videos, because sometimes you have some jokes that would seem as racially insensitive or maybe offensive, and so I tell people, hey, if this is offensive to you and you don't want to watch it, please don't watch it. That's not my point. My point is to show this work in the uncensored form and then have you, create an opinion on it.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, you'd see African Americans in roles of train porters, different things like that, but played in a way that was very stereotypical of that era, of that day. But that is when it was created. They weren't creating it now. This was created back when that was the life. And, of course, they also did a lot of World War II shorts at that time because – right, because Three Stooges shorts, you might want to talk about this. I mean, people didn't have television, and they eventually did, but not when the Stooges were creating it. They would have to see these things in the theater when they were seeing newsreels and other things prior to a movie.
Yes, and that was something that I was really surprised finding out when I was doing research on these guys, that you could not watch these guys on TV. You had to go somewhere, go to a theater, pay some money. And usually these would be, they're called shorts because they're short movies, no longer than 19 minutes. And the shortest ones, I believe, are around 15 minutes. And so they were fairly short, and the idea was to just have a little bit of entertainment before a bigger movie or before maybe the star movie. But some people would just go and watch the Stooges. And I think, in my mind, I mean, these guys are the precursors for television shows because, it's eventually what killed them. In essence, their shorts,
yeah.
Because television kind of took over. But yeah, these guys were before TV.
And these shorts, actually, they were called two-reelers. That was the name for those back then. And so when you were seeing two-reelers before a movie, you always knew you were getting. And it wasn't just the Stooges; other people would make two-reelers as well. That would always precede a film because that's what you did for fun back then. You took a date, you went to the movies, and it was a whole evening. And so you had all of these things prior to it. Now the Stooges did make their way into feature films, right? They certainly grew into that way and made a whole series of them. But those never really seemed to catch on the way the old ones did. Do you think it was the transfer to color and to those, or do you think was it the changing roles of the Stooges, and specifically it was the changing role of Curly to Shemp to Curly Joe, to Joe Besser to Curly Joe?
Yeah.
What do you think that was?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of factors, and in my opinion, it was difficult. The Stooges had a difficult life in the sense of they're doing their shorts with Mo, Larry, and Curly, the trio that we know, but many people forget that Shemp was one of the original Stooges, even before Curly when they were in vaudeville. And so Shemp knew what he was doing, and after Curly, got sick, he had health issues, Shemp came in. And in my opinion, the shorts are still pretty good. I mean, they were still fairly, they held their own. However, with the passing of Shemp, which was pretty sudden, they were kind of frantic. They were like, okay, we have no more brothers. Who are we going to get? And also Columbia wasn't willing to spend much money on the writing. And so the writing suffered, and therefore the shorts suffered. And going into the movies, kind of similarly, it became difficult for them to keep it out.
And, of course, they were getting older as time went on as well.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the trivia questions that you'll know the answer to. Which of the Stooges were actually brothers?
Which of the Stooges were actually brothers? Well, great question. Well, of course, we know Moe and Shemp were brothers.
Right.
And Curly.
That's right. Those were the three. People think Larry was. Larry was not a brother. Larry was a friend, and Jewish in their background. And we often, in fact, the father would show up in certain scenes and all that kind of thing. Do you remember their real names? I can give these to you.
Jerome. I know that was Curly.
Jerome was Curly.
And then Moe, I think he was Moses.
Well, actually, I was going to say Morris, but I think it was both. I think it was Moses that became Morris.
Yeah.
And Shemp was.
And Shemp was Samuel, I believe. His mom had trouble saying Samuel, so she said Shemp. It kind of sounded like
Exactly. Exactly. And I always thought, I thought Shemp was and people have these debates as to whether Shemp or Curly was funnier and whatever. Well, you found a lot of bloopers in those. We're not going to play any here because so many of those are visual. But once again, a continuity issue versus just a mistake. What are the kinds of errors that you have found as you watched the Stooges shorts?
I always try to tell people, and sometimes I think some people misunderstand my motives in some of the comments, because I think a lot of people do get it, but some people say, oh, you're just trying to bash the show and be nitpicky, and I think it's the contrary. It's the idea of looking at these shows that we watch and that we enjoy, and then noticing little things in them, maybe little quirks, little details. Like, for example, the Stooges have tons of wires pulling on things. That was the computer graphics they had back then, pull on things, and you would see maybe a stage hand off to the side. You would see mic booms, lots of mic booms come into the shot, because they did a lot of exterior filming, and so you get to see those a lot.
And you show those. A lot of your videos, you'll show if you look closely and then you'll run it again slowly, you'll see the shadow of a mic boom or something like that as it's going through. So now I have to ask you, in terms of how you find these things, are you finding other sources that point these errors out to you, or have you really taken the time, painstaking time, to look at every one of these almost second by second to where you can, because some of these things you got to look that closely to catch some of these errors. How do you find these bloopers?
Yes, and this is something, I guess it's a little secret, and I'll kind of give it to you. And I don't know how much of a secret in essence, but I do a lot of research. I really do a lot of research. I read a lot of books. And for a lot of these things, you have to read, for example, Moe's autobiography, and you have to read, there's a great book out there. It's the Three Stooges Hollywood filming locations, and it shows all the filming locations, but it also shows you little tricks and tips and just things that would be interesting. But also, for example, for I Love Lucy, there are some things that I just noticed. I see people in the background, and I'll point that out. So it's a combination of all those methods. But I never want to claim that I'm the tried and true person who knows everything. Of course not. I'm still learning, and there's things that I don't know, and I want to learn more.
But you do you do take the time to go then find those shorts, find that moment, and then you provide it to us so we don't have to.
Exactly. I do the hard work so you can just enjoy it.
Exactly, and that I do. I just love watching these. And so first of all, for people that want to see the videos, I mean, again, I tripped over you, okay? I'm going to be honest about that, and you can probably start going to YouTube and Googling I Love Lucy. But what's the quickest way to go to your channel and find your videos?
Yeah, so the quickest way is just get on the internet, go to google.com, and in the search bar, just type in Rick, R-I-C-K, space N-I-N-E-G, and you should come up with some videos that should pop up. You'll probably see some I Love Lucy, or you can type in Ricknineg Three Stooges or Ricknineg I Love Lucy, and for sure it'll come up.
Now, I also want to ask you, Ricknineg is kind of a stage name for you, and I want to ask you the kind of the orientation of that name, but the reason is I think it's not the world of Lucy and the Stooges that will give us the answer to that. I do want to give you a moment to tell listeners about, really, it's another whole part of your life, and it's probably a bit of a different generation, maybe a bit of a younger generation, though you could say I'm wrong about that. But talk to folks about what you do in the whole gaming world. This was new to me when I learned about this.
Yeah, so in the gaming world, it's kind of funny how I got into it. My brother is a big gamer. I'm talking about extreme. If I can even use that word. And I never got into it. He would always call me, games and games. And I'd be like, okay, I would brush it off. I was too busy studying in school. And so there came a point in my life where it was a very struggle-filled year. And I needed something to unwind. I really did. And I started to just say, well, I have a few games over here that I used to play when I was like 5, 6 years old. It would be kind of nice to pick them up again. And it started from there. And I started to get into just different types of games, more strategic games. I mean, I play a game where you help run the government. And you have to.
They might actually need you to do that if you have some time, to be honest with you.
And so, I got into gaming, and I guess it's a niche market because gaming, is so popular, but especially what I play, survival tech games where you have to scavenge for food and build homes and things like that. Kind of nerdy, but it's a way to de-stress, from the work and everyday life as well as these shows that I look at.
And I have talked to people who are like into gaming. They know your name, and they'll say, yeah, I've watched that guy. He plays certain games. So people literally come on, watch you play, and you're guiding them and giving them tips, and they're almost a bit educational, true?
Absolutely. There's a little bit of, comedy in there every once in a while. But I think the idea is I tell people this is the time to just sit back, relax, and just like maybe bring some popcorn, bring out, a drink and just watch me play. It's like a little adventure. Some of these games have stories in them, and they're a great way to just, entertain yourself for 20 or so minutes and just have fun with me. It's great because as you watch these videos, many people have told me they feel like they're in the room with me and they're kind of journeying with me through this gaming experience.
Which is so great. And by the way, you'll also put notices on Facebook. Sometimes you just go live. You let people, and it'll be an I Love Lucy moment or a Stooges moment where people can just interact with. That's why, we really do. We walk around with like a little TV studio, movie studio in our pockets with our phone. But the reality is people interact with you, ask you questions, and maybe that's why people get real friendly with folks who do what you do, because there is this social networking connection that really brings the worlds together. That distance that used to be there decades ago. If you ever met Lucy, you were just lucky. These days, if Lucy were around, you might be able to actually send her an email. She might respond to you.
Isn't that amazing? I've contacted so many people and have had little interactions through social media. And I've had people say, Rick, I was literally on the bus. I'm notified. They get an email notification that I have a live stream on. So they literally log in, and then they're on the bus going somewhere, maybe to see their grandmother, but they are watching me live on their phone. Like, it's amazing.
It's amazing stuff that you do. I'm glad I tripped over you. I guess that's what that means. I'm a real social media guru, right? Because I found you. But I just love the work you do in the I Love Lucy world, the Three Stooges world. And I know that the people who are into the gaming world love you for that as well. As I said, you have quite the name for yourself in that world, which I know. Encourage everybody to kind of check you out. Go to YouTube. And once again, you can search Rick9G. But it's not the number. It's Nine and then the letter G, right? Rick9G.
Yeah.
Check him out, follow him, and before you know it, you'll get to know him, too, because he'll have some kind of live sessions where you'll get to interact with him. Hey, thanks for your time. I know this is kind of an unusual thing for you to do in terms of creating this kind of discussion and podcast, but it was fun. I thought it was great, and I like I said, from when I first found you, I said, I want to do this, and thank you for doing it with me.
Oh, well, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much. Like I said, this is kind of my first interview, so I appreciate you reaching out to me and just talking about these topics that I love so much, and I'm sure a lot of people out there love, and maybe they stop watching these shows for a little bit, and they'll be like, hey, maybe I'll start watching again.
I hope so, and at least we gave them a week away from Trump and politics and everything else going on. That's not a bad thing either sometimes, right? Whatever you feel, it's not a bad thing to just take a break.
Absolutely.
Rick9G, thanks for your time, my friend. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Well, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Well, if you want to know more about what we've talked about here, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at Paul Lisnek. That's PaulLisnek. And I'd love to hear your comments or topic suggestions for future podcasts. You can also go to my website, paullisnek.tv. And, hey, don't forget to hit subscribe on WGN Plus and iTunes. And tune in each week to hear more Insider Scoop coming to you from behind the curtain.